My former husband ended his life for his ex-girlfriend, and I walked away with my baby. When my husband learned that his beloved Fiona had passed away, he dramatically leaped off the cruise ship during our honeymoon, ending his own life. Only then did I realize he had never truly moved on from her. Transported back to my teenage years, I remembered how he had once let go of my hand without hesitation and walked toward his cherished Fiona. I watched them leave and turned away. From that moment on, our lives became parallel lines, destined never to meet. A decade later, fate brought us together again at a high-profile event in Ocean City. Gideon had risen among the elite, standing tall with Fiona affectionately on his arm. When he saw me mistakenly enter the venue, he couldn't help but speak condescendingly. "Stop holding on to the past. Even if you wait another 10 years, I still won't love you." I ignored him and retrieved my cake-eating son from the corner. His eyes suddenly reddened as he grabbed my hand tightly. "Are you trying to provoke me on purpose? Didn't you once say you'd love me for a lifetime?" I never imagined I would cross paths with Gideon again in this lifetime. At an elite gathering in Ocean City, he stood among the crowd with Fiona, exuding charm and sophistication, a far cry from the awkward boy I once knew. The people around him spoke in flattering tones. "Young Master Gideon is truly impressive, securing such a major project at a young age. Is this your beloved? You two make such a striking couple." Fiona gazed at Gideon with deep affection and said softly, "We're planning to get married by the end of the year. If you have time, we'd love for you to join us." A round of congratulations followed, and someone curiously asked, "I heard you've been together for 10 years. Why wait so long to get married?" I was curious too. In my past life, Gideon had loved Fiona so much that he had been willing to die for her. After being given a second chance, he immediately broke up with me. I had assumed they would marry right after graduation, yet they still hadn't even registered their marriage. For a brief moment, Gideon's face stiffened, but he quickly masked it with a smile. "You need a career before family. I want to give Fiona the best life possible." His gaze softened as he looked at her, filled with a tenderness that overflowed. I recalled how, when we were together, I had asked him countless times when we could get married. He had only agreed under his family's pressure, his reluctance painfully obvious. It turns out, the difference between love and indifference is unmistakably clear. I was about to leave when I noticed a small figure and instinctively followed. Oops. Champagne spilled everywhere as a waiter holding a tray turned to me with an irritated expression. "Where did you come from? Are you blind?" His voice was loud enough to draw the attention of those nearby. Gideon's eyes darkened when he saw me. "Adeline, why are you here?" I lowered my head, apologizing to the waiter. "I'm looking for someone." Someone in the crowd turned to Gideon, intrigued. "You know her, young Master Gideon?" Gideon tightened his grip on his wine glass, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, just an ex-girlfriend." A guest nearby blurted out, "You've been with Fiona for 10 years, I thought she was your first love." The smile on Fiona's face faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered, holding on to Gideon's hand with a casual laugh. "We were young back then. Everyone takes a wrong turn once in their life." Gideon remained silent, his gaze shifting past me to the waiter. "Charge the damages to my account. Let her go." His tone was calm, as if eager to draw a clear line between us in front of Fiona. The waiter quickly ushered me toward the exit. "Young Master Gideon is being kind, cleaning up your mess, but don't expect another favor." He sneered at my wrinkled attire. "This isn't a place for someone like you. Hurry up and leave." I pulled my arm free, keeping my tone polite. "I'm only here to find someone. Once I do, I'll leave on my own." The waiter scoffed, rolling his eyes. "I've seen plenty of women trying to climb up the social ladder. Do you even belong here? If you keep lingering, I'll call security." "Wait." Gideon's voice came from behind him. He sighed, rubbing his temple before looking at me helplessly. "She's here to find me. Let me talk to her." I was puzzled, not understanding why he reacted so strongly. Wasn't it normal to delete an ex's contact after a breakup? Besides, I had someone at home who was particularly jealous. If he knew I still had my ex's contact, he'd definitely make a fuss. Didn't you say you hoped I wouldn't come looking for you after our breakup? Gideon's face turned cold as if he wanted to say something but held back. I remained calm. I don't need breakup compensation. Gideon's expression darkened further, his voice laced with disdain. What are you pretending for? If you weren't in such a miserable state, I wouldn't even be talking to you. Fiona quickly soothed him with a gentle voice. Well, she was a prestigious university graduate. Given her current situation, let's just consider helping her. Someone nearby, eager to curry favor, sneered. Oh Fiona, you're still so kind. But why bother? Look at her pathetic state, just tell her to get lost. Gideon's tone was filled with scorn, as if he had forgotten that 10 years ago, he had been in an even worse situation than I was. In my past life, Gideon's family had disapproved of Fiona because of her reputation. She was a woman who sought shortcuts. The first time I met Gideon in college, he had just picked Fiona up from a club, forced by his family to break up with her. During his most depressed times, I had stayed by his side, supporting him. He loved photography, so I had used the money I'd saved to start a business, to buy him expensive equipment. Through freezing winters and scorching summers, I, frail as I was, had carried dozens of pounds of gear, following him, just to see him smile. Who would have thought that he would be the one to confess to me first? I had known about his past with Fiona, had seen him staring at their photos in a daze. So when Gideon confessed, I had asked him seriously. Have you truly moved on from Fiona? At that time, he had held me tightly, his voice firm. Actually, I never loved her. I just saw her as a good friend. It's you I love, Adeline. Let's be together. We had dated for 7 years, even surprising his friends. He liked Fiona so much, I thought you two wouldn't last. But no one knew that Gideon had repeatedly dodged the topic of marriage. Adeline, I don't believe in marriage. Can't we just stay like this forever? Until his parents pressured him into it. Only then had he reluctantly agreed. During our honeymoon, after learning about Fiona's car accident, he had jumped off the cruise ship, leaving behind only a note. A note filled with love for Fiona, without a single word for me. At the end, written in his own blood, he had scrawled. Fiona, you're the only one I want to love in this life. Now, I'm coming for you. My love for him had turned to ashes at that moment. So, after being given a second chance, when Gideon wanted to break up, I hadn't stopped him. Because I knew, I couldn't stop it. Watching them reunite, I had deleted all of Gideon's contact information, thinking we would never cross paths again. But I hadn't expected to encounter them here. I wanted to leave, but Fiona wasn't willing to let me go so easily. She was determined to humiliate me. Do you even deserve to speak to me? Look at how you're dressed, it's embarrassing. Here's an idea, I can help you get a job here as a waiter. If you learn to serve people, you could make a 5-figure salary every month. Someone eager to please her chimed in with a grin. This hotel is in a prime location in Ocean City. Working here is a rare opportunity. You should thank Miss Fiona. Surrounded and unable to leave, I replied helplessly. Thank you, but I already have a job. As a photographer. The moment I mentioned photography, Gideon's gaze flickered with a complex expression. His lips parted slightly, but he quickly masked his emotions. He averted his gaze and spoke indifferently. How much can you even earn from photography? Hobbies don't pay the bills. Since we're old acquaintances, I can set you up with a real job. I was momentarily taken aback, then realized he had misunderstood. My love for photography had nothing to do with him. In fact, the moment I had read that suicide note in my past life, I had already given up on him completely. When I returned to life, I found that all my money had been spent on photography equipment. Since I couldn't sell it secondhand, I had no choice but to use it myself. Eventually, I genuinely fell in love with photography. This time, it wasn't about pleasing anyone else, it was for me. I declined Gideon's offer again, my tone polite but distant. My hobby is enough to cover my expenses, but thank you for your concern. Gideon's expression darkened at my refusal. If you don't take the opportunity I'm offering, don't come crying to me later. I said nothing. There was no need to tell him that my work had already been featured in national publications and top international magazines. The licensing fees alone matched, if not surpassed, his annual income. But even if I did say it, he'd probably dismiss it as boasting. After all, dressed in wrinkled pajamas, I hardly looked the part of a successful professional. Not that it was my fault, I had only been playing with my son in the sandbox when he slipped away downstairs again. I hadn't even had time to change before chasing after him. As I was about to excuse myself, the hotel waiter suddenly pointed at me, his expression sharp. Balenciaga? Where did you get those clothes? Are you a cleaner here, stealing from guests? I frowned. Why wouldn't these clothes be mine? Fiona sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. Yours? Can you even afford them? What kind of wealthy person runs around looking as unkempt as you? She dramatically covered her nose, feigning disgust. So filthy. Did you even wash it before wearing it? Gideon's frown deepened. Adeline, have you really fallen to such a low point and still refuse to admit it? I had no interest in engaging with them, so I turned to the waiter. If you really think I stole something, call the police now. I knew he was only trying to please Fiona by humiliating me. As expected, his arrogance wavered. If it weren't for the VIP guests today, I'd already have called the police. Fiona's eyes brightened at that. VIP guests? You mean Mr. Lowe? I heard he's in Ocean City with his family, staying here at this hotel. Gideon nodded, anticipation flashing across his face. If our company can get the Lowe family's support, it would be a game-changer for our project. At the mention of Mr. Lowe, the guests buzzed with excitement. That entire building is owned by the Lowe family. I heard he married young and already has a child, but who did he marry? As the speculation continued, the lobby manager suddenly rushed in, looking panicked. A group of staff followed closely behind him. Everyone, has anyone seen a 7-year-old boy? He's about this tall. The manager wiped sweat from his forehead, his voice urgent. A murmur spread through the crowd. Could it be the Lowe family's young master? The Lowe heir is 7, isn't he? Immediately, everyone started searching. Helping find the child could be the perfect opportunity to curry favor with the Lowe family. Gideon and Fiona eagerly joined the search, leaving me alone. Watching the chaotic scene, I turned and walked straight to the dessert section. As expected, I found my son there, his little face smeared with cream, happily munching on a pastry. I crossed my arms. Come here. Startled, my son clung to the table leg. No. Just as I was about to pull him out, Fiona suddenly appeared, blocking my way. Adeline, what do you think you're doing? She scolded. She turned to the guests with righteous indignation. Even if you're desperate to get close to the Lowe family, you shouldn't lay hands on someone else's child. Gideon arrived at the commotion, looking at me with disapproval. Adeline, I didn't think you'd stoop this low for status and wealth. At that moment, the waiter eagerly chimed in. She also snuck into the banquet and stole a guest's clothing. The manager's face turned cold. Arrest this woman and call the police. If she frightens the young master, none of you will keep your jobs. Fiona's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she crouched down and put on a kind smile. Come here, sweetheart. Auntie will protect you. But instead of going to her, my son carefully reached for my hand and held on tightly. His voice was soft. Mom, I know I was wrong. A stunned silence fell over the room. I twisted his ear, my tone firm. Did you forget what the doctor said? You have cavities, and you're still sneaking sweets? My son winced and clutched my arm. Mom, I only ate a little. I won't get cavities. Fiona's face stiffened. If he wants to eat, let him. Who are you to scold him? I looked at her calmly. I'm his mother. Why wouldn't I? A gasp rippled through the guests. Only then did Fiona realize what my son had called me. Her eyes darted between him and me, her expression frozen. I let go of my son's ear, and he immediately clung to me, attempting to please. Mom, let's go home. I want to see Dad. The lobby manager, still sweating profusely, cautiously stepped forward. Ma'am, are you saying you're Mr. Lowe's wife? I nodded. Yes. He exhaled in relief, his demeanor instantly changing. I apologize for the misunderstanding, ma'am. Would you and the young master like to return upstairs to freshen up? I was about to accept when someone suddenly grabbed my wrist. Turning around, I saw Gideon staring at me in disbelief. You're married? And have a child? I gently pulled my sleeve from his grip, my expression indifferent. Yes, I got married after graduation. Lachlan and I had met through photography. While shooting abroad, he had an accident while hiking and fell off a slope. The signal was weak, and I struggled to pull him back up. While waiting for rescue, he idly browsed through my photos, and we started talking. By the time we returned home, we had already fallen for each other. His family never looked down on my background. Instead, Lachlan had told me, Adeline, it was your character and strength that made my decision. I once thought my past with Gideon had scarred me too deeply to love again. But Lachlan showed me that love should be mutual, where both people choose each other. The pain of my past life now felt like a distant memory. My son tugged on my sleeve. Mom, let's go find Dad. I want to play with him. But Gideon still wouldn't let go. His voice trembled slightly. You told me you'd love only me in this lifetime. Did you really say that? A deep male voice interrupted from behind me. Did she? A ripple of respect spread through the crowd as they greeted the newcomer. Hello, Mr. Lowe. Hello, Chairman Lowe. I turned and saw Lachlan standing there, his gaze landing firmly on Gideon. He wrapped an arm around my waist and asked casually, Is this your ex-boyfriend? Worried he'd get jealous, I quickly clarified, we dated for a month when we were young, but we haven't spoken in 10 years. Gideon's face paled. I continued, my voice steady. I never promised to love you for life. Gideon stiffened. He understood what I meant. Whatever promises had been made in the past no longer mattered. But we have so much history, he protested. How can you just forget everything? I sighed. Why not? You're getting married next month. And now you want to blame me? Isn't that a bit much? Gideon opened his mouth, but Fiona grabbed his arm. Gideon, let's go. She's married. It's none of your business. But when she tried to pull him away, he pushed her aside. For the first time, he ignored her completely. Lachlan chuckled, sizing up Gideon with an amused expression. So, you're her ex? He tilted his head slightly, a smirk playing on his lips. Her taste was rather ordinary before. Are you thinking of trying again? Gideon paled, fumbling for words. No, I raised my hand to stop him. Gideon, whatever we had is over. I have a family now, and you have someone you love. I wish you happiness. Those last words hit Gideon hard, leaving him speechless. His eyes glistened with unshed tears as he stared at me. Adeline, have you really forgotten our past? I can't believe it. We were together for so long, and you loved me so much. Lachlan's displeasure was obvious. He let out a cold laugh. A month? How long is that really? Longer than our marriage? I knew Gideon was referring to our past life, when I had stayed by his side for 10 years. But telling that to Lachlan wouldn't make him understand. I shook my head, cutting Gideon off. I haven't forgotten, I've moved on. I don't care anymore. I met his gaze firmly. In this life, we chose different paths, which means the past doesn't matter. I returned his own words to him, watching as realization dawned on his face. Gideon, let go of the past. It's long over between us. As soon as I said this, tears welled up in Gideon's eyes. I didn't want to continue the conversation, but before I could step away, Lachlan spoke in a calm yet authoritative voice. I heard someone accused my wife of theft and wanted to report her to the police. The waiter, trembling, quickly bowed in apology. It was my mistake. I misjudged your wife. I sincerely apologize to both of you. His arrogance from earlier had completely vanished. After dealing with the waiter, Lachlan turned to Fiona with a mocking smile. You wanted to introduce my wife to a new job at my hotel? Should I thank you for that? His voice was laced with sarcasm. Adeline earns millions in royalties a year. Can you offer her a salary that high? Fiona's forced smile faltered, and she quickly retreated into the crowd. I was just joking. Don't take it seriously. The other guests, who had mocked me earlier, now avoided eye contact, afraid that Lachlan would remember their faces. After settling everything, Lachlan looked down at me, raising an eyebrow. I knew he was standing up for me in his own way. I wrapped one arm around our son and used the other to hold Lachlan's waist. Thanks, love. I'm not upset anymore. Gideon, still unwilling to let go, took a step forward as if he wanted to say something. But under Lachlan's sharp gaze, he stopped himself. Back upstairs, Lachlan wasted no time calling someone to prepare a fresh set of clothes for me and our son. He pulled out his phone and had his assistant custom order a new wardrobe for me. He frowned, clearly still bothered by what had happened. Those people look down on you when I'm not around. His voice grew colder. Looks like I need to get rid of any clothes under 6 figures. I quickly stopped his urge to splurge. I travel a lot for photography. I can't wear expensive gowns everywhere. Just something durable and easy to wash is fine. Lachlan fell silent for a moment, deep in thought. Then his eyes lit up with a new idea. Then I'll get you a new car. Do you prefer a Maserati or a Maybach? I shook my head, amused by his way of showing affection. It was clear he was upset about how I had been treated today. Over the years, Lachlan had always treated me well. Many people assumed that because I came from an ordinary background, I had become a full-time housewife, lowering myself to fit into his world. But in reality, our marriage was built on mutual respect. Lachlan valued my career. When work wasn't busy, he even traveled with me, letting me teach him photography. With him, life felt no different from any other happy couples. Especially today, after seeing Gideon, I had no regrets about my choices. I had thought that banquet was the last time I would see Gideon. But unexpectedly, I ran into him again while out on a photography assignment. That day, Gideon wore a simple white t-shirt, looking fresh and reminiscent of his college days. When he saw me, he immediately stood up, as if he had been waiting. Adeline, I knew you'd come here, he said, his voice filled with pain and conflict. His eyes searched mine desperately. You clearly haven't forgotten the past. You still love me, don't you? Instinctively, I took a step back. My gaze flickered around, suddenly realizing where we were. This was the park we used to visit together in our previous life. I had chosen this spot purely for convenience, not expecting Gideon to be here. He had been waiting for me. I felt a headache coming on. Why hadn't he given up yet? Gideon, the past is the past. What do you want? I exhaled sharply, crossing my arms. Are you just asking if I still love you? I've said it countless times, I don't. Why won't you believe me? I narrowed my eyes at him, my tone growing colder. Do you want me to say I love you? And then what? I divorce Lachlan, you break up with Fiona, and we get back together? Barely had I finished speaking when Gideon lunged forward eagerly. Of course, we can. We can be together again. His eyes burned with hope. I stared at him, stunned. I had assumed Gideon was just nostalgic, clinging to the idea of the girl who had adored him for 10 years in our past life. But I hadn't expected him to actually want to reconcile. I took another step back, my frown deepening. Are you crazy? In our last life, you died for Fiona. In this life, you're with her. And now you want to break up? Gideon's face twisted with pain, his voice dropping to a whisper. Adeline, I wronged you. His words hung in the air between us. Yes, I sought Fiona after being reborn, Gideon admitted, his voice low. But after being with her, I realized I didn't love her as much as I thought. He exhaled heavily, eyes filled with regret. She's brought up marriage many times, but I never agreed. I always remembered our unfinished honeymoon from our past life. Hearing him mention the past, I remained calm. I remember you left a note saying you'd only marry Fiona. Gideon shook his head, desperation creeping into his voice. But I regret it. I don't want to be with her. If I had another chance, I wouldn't leave you. He took a step closer. Adeline, can we start over? This time, I'll dedicate myself to you and never cause you pain again. His confession only amused me. You want another chance, but a second life is already a gift. Gideon, we're adults, we must own our choices. I met his gaze, my tone softer but firm. I don't regret this life. Not leaving you, not marrying Lachlan, not pursuing my own dreams. Gideon clenched his fists. We have 10 years of memories together. My love isn't less than Lachlan's. Why did you choose him? I smiled and tilted my head. We have 10 years, but tell me, do you know my favorite food? What I'm allergic to? My favorite color? My favorite game? With each question, Gideon's face paled further. I sighed. Gideon, you say you love me, but what exactly do you love? My voice softened. During those 10 years, I always put your needs ahead of mine, losing myself in the process. What you loved was my selfless, unconditional devotion. I picked up the camera in my hands and showed it to him. In this life, I'm living for myself, not for anyone else. Lachlan loves me for who I truly am, the whole, authentic me. After that, Gideon never sought me out again. Lachlan, however, asked about him a few times, clearly uneasy about my ex-boyfriend. He's naturally the jealous type, so I told him about my encounter with Gideon in the park and spent quite some time reassuring him. Not long after, I heard that Gideon's company had gone bankrupt. That's when I found out Fiona had developed a gambling addiction behind his back. She had always had reckless tendencies, but once she gained access to money, her habits spiraled out of control. Gideon, ever indulgent, had entrusted her with the company's finances at her insistence. That decision proved disastrous. Predators had already set their sights on this naive, reckless upstart, laying a trap she never saw coming. After a fight with Gideon over me, she turned to gambling in a drunken haze, convinced she could win back some control. Instead, she lost everything. Terrified of Gideon's reaction, she embezzled funds from the company, hoping to recover her losses. But casinos are not places to win money back. She didn't just fail, she lost even more. Gideon only realized the full extent of the damage when the company's funds ran dry. By then, it was too late. And because he and Fiona were married, their debts became shared marital debts. While attending a banquet with Lachlan, I overheard people discussing the scandal. The listeners could only sigh, shaking their heads. Gideon, once so proud, had finally lost everything. Gideon was such a promising young man, but he made a poor choice marrying that woman, wasting half his life. Yeah, I heard she used to be a club girl. Whenever she lost money, she'd resort to shady dealings. The last time Gideon went to find her, her sugar daddy chased him away. Lachlan frowned at the gossip. Though he didn't think highly of Gideon, he still felt a twinge of sympathy as a fellow man. I want to find him a lawyer to help him get a divorce. What do you think? I nodded, sighing inwardly. Having chosen a different path only to end up like this, Gideon's regret must be overwhelming. The divorce case was handled swiftly. A few days later, Gideon met with Lachlan. His face was bruised, evidence of a recent fight, but his expression was calmer than before.